How you doing, Wendy? Good.
You look a lot like him.
Okay, good evening, citizens, council, and staff. I'd like to call the City Council meeting of September 19th to order. Clerk Hefner, can you call the roll?
Mayor Beckman?
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Brinkman? Here. Councilmember Sinanik?
Present.
Councilmember Clark?
Here.
Councilmember Cole? Here. Councilmember Hopping?
Here.
Councilmember Valdez?
I am here.
Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. The agenda has been posted and presented to City Council. Are there any changes or additions to the agenda? For those folks who are normal watchers of City Council, item number 4 is usually not recognizing a guest or a proclamation. We do that on special occasions, and tonight is one of them. So agenda item 4 is a guest and proclamation, two items A and B. But before that, I want to just mention that one of our council members had a very recent birthday. And unbeknownst to that council member, there's cake up in the community room. And if we zip through this council meeting very quickly, it'll still be fresh. So happy birthday.
Are you looking at Peggy?
No singing, Peggy's.
I'm 200 years old.
Congratulations, Peggy.
Music time, Bruce.
Yeah, just about. I'm very proud to be able to read a proclamation to someone tonight, and they are standing or sitting up on the landing up there, and I would like to have, if council would go along with me on this, have council join her up on the landing while I read the proclamation. While we do that, I want to mention that the idea of recognizing Irene was presented originally by Councilmember Peggy Cole, who has worked with her for several years on the Citizens Police Academy Alumni Association. Irene, you do not need to stand to hear your own proclamation. You do not. This is a proclamation of the City of Littleton, Colorado, proclaiming September 19th, 2017 as Irene Woodall Day in the City of Littleton. Whereas Irene and Jack Woodall arrived in Littleton 45 years ago, they built their home on South Perry Court in 1972 when they moved from Savannah, Georgia, as one of the original families relocated to Colorado to work at the new Johns Mansville facility. Whereas from the very beginning, Irene immersed herself in her beloved Beaumar Knolls neighborhood. She and Jack raised their 3 children who attended Centennial Elementary, Goddard Middle, and Littleton High Schools in Littleton. Whereas her passion for flowers and plants resulted in founding the Ladybugs Garden Club, which she began in 1974. The group still meets monthly to hear speakers and share their love of gardening. Whereas in 1982, Irene began working with the Neighborhood Watch and its offshoot, National Night Out. For 35 years, she rallied her neighbors for a big gathering and coordinated everything from distributing door hangers to buying food to scheduling people to staff the barbecue grill. The event has always been held in the Woodall backyard or in front of their home. Whereas Irene and Jack both graduated from the Littleton Police Citizens Academy in 2005, they have volunteered for many Alumni Association activities, helping with traffic and crowds at the Western Welcome Week Parade. Whereas Irene also brought her neighborhood together on other occasions to discuss traffic and other issues, and most importantly, to spend time together. Whereas besides her many volunteer activities, Irene worked for the University of Denver in the registrar's office and, not surprisingly, volunteered her service on the DU Retirees Board for 21 years. Whereas despite some recent significant health issues, Irene was still involved in the 2017 National Night Out, which was again held in front of the Woodall home. Now, therefore, I, Bruce O. Beckman, Mayor of the City of Littleton, do hereby proclaim September 19th, 2017 as Irene Woodall Day. Irene said, "It's a privilege to live in Littleton." While that is true, it is a privilege to have Irene and Jack as residents of the city. They exemplify the best of what it means to be a caring neighbor and a good citizen. The Littleton City Council wishes to extend its sincere appreciation to Irene for everything she has done to make Littleton a better place. In witness whereof, I have hereunto set my hand and caused the official seal of the City of Littleton to be affixed this 15th day of August, 2017. And we have a microphone up there, Irene, if you'd like to say a few words while I walk up.
Very unique occasion, and I appreciate it very much. Oh, this one wasn't working?
I'll get together real close and we'll get a good picture of Mayor and you. Okay, thank you.
Oh, this is yours, not mine.
I just want the switch, I don't want the chair.
I don't know if it's on the camera, but the police officer that started the whole thing, one of several on a team of people back at the very beginning, was Dan Stocking, who's been retired for several years, quite a few years from the police department, came in tonight just specifically to say hi to Irene. He was the officer who got it started and worked with her from the very beginning in National Night Outs. Okay, we have the second presentation, and we're going to show a video first. It's a video production made by the City of Littleton regarding the crabapple route, and if we could get that started, then I'll introduce the speaker.
In the early 1970s, the mayor of the city was a fellow named Vaughn Gardenier, and he approached the city council on the idea we ought to do something for beautification. And one of the things would be we could plant crabapple trees. And the idea was the city could plant trees in public rights-of-way, you know, street rights-of-way and that sort of thing, and then encourage people to plant trees in their yard. And so from that, for several years, the city planted trees every year. Many people planted them in their yards, and so some of the big trees that you see around town are 45, almost 50 years old. Before he died, Vaughn went back to city council and said, I've toured around the country, and there are places in the country that capitalize on their beauty in the spring. He said, we've got enough crabapple trees, we ought to do the same thing. And so he laid out a route, it's actually 7 miles, about 10K, around the city in to capture some of the most attractive vistas, if you will, and took it to City Council and said, why don't you officially designate that as a Littleton crabapple route? And so they did. It was always a joke. They loved Gardenier in the spring when the trees were in bloom, and they hated him in the fall when the crabapples fell on the ground. It made a big mess. Remaining places to plant trees are in private property, and if the property owner wants us to, we'll plant a tree there, but if they don't request it, we don't. So the idea was, is there an expansion? And we came up with the idea of expanding to the Littleton Community Trail. If you're at the light rail station, if you just look across the tracks up on the hill behind, we put in 15 flowering crabapple trees there. And I think it'll be a kind of a nice attraction. So when you get off the light rail train, you're not looking at that concrete wall. It's kind of stark. You'll actually see those. It'll be kind of a little beautification thing. The new crabapple trees that we're putting in now are a species that they bloom and they're as colorful as the other trees, but they don't create crabapples that fall off. Tiny little crabs that tend to stay on the tree. Board members looked around and said, there are a lot of crabapple trees in Littleton. Wonder how many there are. And then from that we said, we ought to go out and count them, physically count them. The Boy Scouts volunteered, the Rotary Club volunteered. Literally, we went out with maps and located every flowering crabapple tree in Littleton with the idea that, you know, we'd come with a big number and we could apply to Guinness. Turns out there are almost 7,000 crabapple trees in the city. And if there are like 42,000 people, you do the math, that's one crabapple tree for every 6 people. I mean, it's a lot of crabapple trees.
Okay, I need some technical help. I'm not sure which button to push.
You know what, it is off, Larry, so I think you're good there.
All right.
Okay, I'd like to introduce who we just saw also in the video, Larry Borger. Larry would like to speak to us about the crabapple route. And for those folks that don't know Larry, Larry was the 3rd professional city manager for the city of Littleton, as he mentioned, from back in the early 70s when Von Gardenier was the mayor. So Larry, you have your time.
I apologize. I had these all systematically organized. But I can't find the one that I'm looking for. Hi, my name is Larry Borger. I'm president of the Littleton Crabapple Route, Inc. It's a nonprofit group that we created to help plant new crabapple trees to continue the tradition. And I want to thank the council for tentatively earmarking $1,500 for next year. And I apologize that that money shouldn't have come out of the nonprofit category. It should have come out of Parks, Trails, and Open Space. And in the future, when we hopefully come back and talk to you again, it will be out of that particular fund. Our mission, and hopefully what we're trying to do, is ask the council to clearly say as a matter of policy to the staff and to South Suburban that crabapple trees are important, that the Littleton Community Trail is important, and that we would like to encourage the staff of the 2 agencies to work together to develop a long-range master plan, a 4 or 5 year plan that would say, Here's how we're going to add trees, add landscaping, add park benches, add historic signs to the Littleton Community Trail, that we can then come back to City Council and talk about funding it sometime in the future. The Littleton Community Trail is an interesting thing, and I'm sorry I can't pull up a map, but it runs north and south on the east side of the railroad. It's a continuous trail, almost 2 miles long. It's a historic trail. It was surveyed by Richard Little in 1860, the same guy for whom Littleton is named. He decided he could make more money selling off his homestead than he could mining for gold. And he was a surveyor, so it all came together. At any rate, it was surveyed by Little, and I think that's a historic story that could be told with display signs and that sort of thing. I won't take more of your time. I apologize for not being able to pull up my other map, but I would answer questions if there were questions council had.
Bill, go ahead.
Larry, I think this is a great thing. Anybody who wants to come up and make this city more beautiful and attractive, and it's got my attention, and it's a wonderful thing. My question is, from the light rail, a lot of the trail is obscured, and where the crabapples are and would go is obscured by weed trees. Would it be part of your plan to make sure those are removed and that there's a clear view of the crabs?
Yes, at some time in the future, we hope the trees will get bigger. They're now fairly small and kind of hard to see. But as the trees get bigger, yes, we would propose to remove what I call trash trees in front of them.
Okay, and how would that be funded? Is that part of what you would ask for? Is that part of South Suburban, or does that belong to the railroad, or do we know?
It would be a city or a South Suburban expense.
Okay.
We raise money in the community to plant trees. I don't think they pay us to cut trees down. And so far, we've planted about 200 flowering crabapple trees, mostly around the crabapple route, and we've sort of done it. And that's why we looked at other options and said the Littleton Community Trail is an opportunity to landscape some areas. So let's see if we can encourage people to do that.
Thank you.
And Larry, two things. One is my recollection is that crabapples are not considered invasive trees in Colorado.
That's true.
And secondly, the community trail is actually, my recollection, the oldest structure in the city of Littleton.
Some historians would say it's the oldest man-made object in the entire metropolitan area that still functions exactly the same way it was designed to function. It's Inglewood's primary water supply, and it runs 12 months a year.
Thank you for your work, Larry.
Thank you.
Peggy?
Yeah, so I didn't have a question. You and I have talked about this before. I will make a comment. In Washington, D.C., the cherry blossoms are not native Japanese cherry blossom trees, but people flock to see those from the whole metropolitan area, and then some people even, I think, decide to get married during that season so they can go be there. And having grown up in the area, I've been there quite a few times. But when you and I talked about this, we observed that indeed this may be a great attractor to Littleton when these kind of come into their own, for people to come and see this during the blossoming time. And the fact that this is on dirt means that none of us is going to be slipping on stuff, probably, if we go along the trail to see them, because they sometimes are a bit slippery along Prince Street, where it was one of the pictures you showed. So
right. Yeah, I think it's. I don't know that we're quite of the same tourist category as cherry blossoms, but we're getting increased publicity. And Kelly Nardi's staff prepared the video that you just saw, and it's on the city website. I think it's something the city can be proud of. And as I say, we get publicity. It increases every year. Last year, Channel 9 had a segment on 10 great places to see crabapple tree or to see blossoms in the spring, and it said be sure to check out the crabapple route in Littleton. So it's
Yeah, I
helping.
wasn't thinking we would be on the same plane as the Japanese cherry blossoms, but for the metro area, this, I think, particularly people just take the light rail, come and see, whether they're coming from the south or north or wherever, they jump off and see those and hopefully enjoy downtown Littleton.
Sure enough.
Great, Larry. Thank you for what you're doing. You're a good neighbor. We both live in Aberdeen Village. We have crab apples all over our neighborhood, and that's where Van Gardner lived, is in Aberdeen Village. So
Right.
I appreciate what you're doing for the city of Littleton very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's a team effort. We have a board of directors, 7 members that work pretty hard at it. Thank you.
Thank you, Larry.
Thank you, Larry.
Thank you.
This brings us to agenda item 5. I don't have the sign-in list. Wendy, if it's up there. This is a period for public comment. Public comment is an opportunity for anyone to express an opinion or ask questions that are not part of the public hearings. We do have one public hearing, so if you wanted to address that public hearing, please wait to that time so that your comments can be correctly recorded as being part of that public hearing. But any immediate response should not be expected during this public comment period. We ask that anyone who would like to speak during the public comment, please sign in. It's helpful for us to be able to then schedule the people who would like to speak. And we expect the comments to be civil. Disrespectful behavior will not be tolerated. There is a 3-minute time limit, and we have on the green sheet I'm not sure exactly who, but the Peninsula Homeowners Association. And if you'd state your name.
Good evening. My name is Steve Bakehuizen, and I am president of the Peninsula Homeowners Association. And I'm here on behalf with a couple of my fellow board members, Bob Werner and Paul Aribi. We just want to say thank you to both the city council and to Mark, as well as the city in general. A couple of years ago, we were having a problem with our streets in our neighborhood. And Peggy had been to my house during her campaigning and said, if you ever have any issues, please call me. So I called her, and Peggy came and spent an hour with our board, walking us through the process, telling us who to deal with and how to deal. And then that was the same night that you had one of those meet and greets at the Ryder Park. And we met Phil. And Phil introduced us to Mark. Mark walked around the neighborhood and kind of went, oh my God. And a lot has happened since then. We certainly appreciate the fact that the streets are fixed. And, we really appreciate it and appreciate all the hard work. The other thing that we'd like to thank is on Saturday night, we had our big neighborhood block party. Little City of Littleton gave us a grant for that, and we appreciate that. And so on behalf of the Peninsula, I want to say thank you.
Thank you.
I have one question. You mentioned Peggy and Phil. You didn't mention me. I mean, we had coffee together, we had breakfast and dinner, and
Don't remember, sorry.
what was that name again, Steve?
Yeah, thank you very much.
Appreciate it.
Well, before they leave, I want to thank them for coming because we don't always get thanked for some of the nice things we do. We hear what we didn't do so nicely, but thank you for taking time to come.
Wonderful community.
Steve Wergers is the next speaker. Steve, okay, he's over. Yeah.
Good afternoon, or good evening. I'm Steve Wergers. I am the president of the newly formed Littleton Business Chamber. And I'm just going to say a couple things about what our mission is. And then I'm going to turn over to the real brains behind this, Cal and Pat, because without these two guys, this wouldn't happen. Our mission is to serve as the principal representative of the businesses in this market area. We want to contribute to the member success and prosperity and promote the economic and civic interests of our community. That's a tall order, and we need help. Thursday night, we're having a get-together over at McKinner's from 3 to 6. We hope to see all of you there. And you'll find out more about us and what we're up to, and also have a chance to join if you would like to. One of the very first things we are going to focus our money and efforts on is the passing of the Tabor 1A and 1B. And so it's things like that that this organization wants to get involved with and do positive things, make this city a better place. Who's next? Cal?
He's taken over.
We have Cal signed up as a speaker.
Yeah, I am next, Mr. Mayor.
Go ahead.
Go ahead. It's
Oh,
all
hi.
yours.
Time's up, sorry,
Good
man.
evening,
It
my
was-
name is Cal.
Nice try, Cal.
Good evening, my name is Cal Murup. The way I came to Littleton was all by mistake. I got lost on Main Street, didn't realize where I was, and then I turned around, came back, and discovered my first stop was at Valor's Hardware. Mr. Dick Valor Sr., he was so welcoming. And I have been in the country now for like 2.5 years, merely 2.5 years. So my English was very, very tiny. Didn't speak English very well. That was in early 1980. At the end of 1980, I signed the lease for 2259 West Main Street. That building does not exist anymore. It's the parking lot for the RTD parking. And then in 83, in 82, I leased the building where Columbine on Main is. And from there on, I moved there in 83, conducted a very successful business. I, as an immigrant, came to this country, and I'm a proud citizen of this beautiful country. This country and this city has given me a lot more than anybody can ever imagine. I came to this country with nothing, and I became very prosperous, and I raised my family here. I love this city. It has given me more than I can ever imagine. And my goal now has been, with my friends, is really to put back in the community and to give back to Littleton. I have a choice: take the money and go to Lebanon, where I'm from, or keep it here. Matter of fact, with my tenants, I tell them, if you ever become prosperous, put your money back in the city. Don't take it home. Leave it here. So therefore, a few friends of mine, we have been watching what goes on with city council and the meetings, and we figured that we need to present you with a positive voice that supports you, support the city government in moving it forward to make it a better place for everybody. Be positive, be pro-business, create interesting venues in the city as a whole, and make it a place where people want to live, work, and play. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Cal. Thank you for everything you've done, too. Our next speaker is Pam Chadburn.
Well, Pam Chadburn, I live a couple of blocks from here. So first off, about the crabapple route. My proposal, when my parents moved here in the 50s, they planted plums, cherries, a different kind of apple, a real apple, and pears. And my question is, why is the crabapple route still crabapples? Because we have hungry people in the city. There are organizations who would come and pick the fruit. So I think the crabapple route should be integrated with real fruit. And they would still bloom. You know what? They still bloom their fruit trees. They'd be beautiful. But they would also provide food. And my parents did that before the crabapple route started. I'm not really sure how we got stuck in beautification without productivity and without contributing back to the people. So that's my comment about the crabapple route. Please, let's try to branch out before we make an investment or a plan. Let's make real fruit somewhere and donate it or give it to people who need it. We have those people in the city if you didn't want to donate it to some other organization. Second of all, I'm really concerned about the economic incentives policy. We have a phrase in my business, walk before you run. This is kind of not just running, but taking the bit in the teeth and going in the race. There are several good things here. Goal one, we want to support existing businesses, of course, and we need a balanced blend of business. And we need to understand the fiscal impact of our business mix. But this goes so far beyond and gives powers. And the one thing I don't see here, maybe I'm missing it, is where's the public hearing? It says Econ Development will bring it to the City Council. Guys, you didn't bring this to us. We haven't had a chance to talk about this, us the people. And where are you bringing the decisions to us? This is huge in its impact. There are discussions, but if they're like Littleton's Listen, they're too disconnected and soft. This stovepipes all the power and staff, and by the time, just like development applications, it gets to City Council, it's too late for us. So I would vote against this, and I urge you to too. It needs to be reformed to do a little bit less at the beginning. And just walk before you run. Let's do some of the studies and analyses and bring them forward. Let's codify them in the citywide plan before saying you're going to follow the citywide plan. It's totally possible to do. I've been urging that for a long time. So finally about the budget, thank you for doing the budget analysis, and I thought it went great. But I'm going to ask you, do not ask employees to use their own phones for a host of reasons. The city should not depend on employees or exploit employees for that purpose, and I don't want my calls to be being picked up on somebody's personal phone, and there's a number of other reasons. Thanks very much for your consideration.
Those are all the people that I have signed up to speak tonight. Is there anyone who would like to speak who missed the opportunity? Yes, Pat, you were alluded to by two other speakers, and I thought you might want to speak. Please.
Pat Donahue. Hi, Council. No South Park other than we're doing really good out in South Park, the South End. You guys remember us out there? It's all good. This Littleton business chamber that Steve and Cal have talked to you about, I just want to add a couple things. One, it's a complete grassroots volunteer organization. No one's paid, no benefits. We don't want to be political. That's why we're completely endorsing in this next council thing, Beckman and Hopping. On the more serious stuff, we think, like you guys have challenges running this city, we all have those challenges with our businesses. Highlands Ranch is the competition, Centennial is the competition, Jeffco's the competition. We have to worry about all them. We've got to stay better than all those areas. We've got to stay better than all those businesses, or that's where people are going to visit and go. So we want to support you guys, which supports us, which helps us, which makes everything hopefully kind of glued together. We're excited about this. We've had a bunch of real positive business input. We have a lot of members that have agreed to sign up and be a part of this. We need you guys to join. It's only $495. I bet you pay South Metro more money than I would ever even want to dream. And what you get for that, you have to ask yourselves what you get for that. This group is Littleton only. We don't have members outside of Littleton. If you don't sit inside the Littleton city limits, you don't join our membership. So we're real serious about that. We also are engaging and promoting some homeowner organizations to help get these votes passed that you guys want. Things that you guys are passionate about, we want to be passionate about. Mark spent over an hour with Cal and I and Steve the other day, which we really felt that was the best thing we could have ever done with this group. Just getting a real feel for what we need to do as a community to support you guys in getting stuff out to the public. We have members that are going to join this organization that have hundreds and hundreds of people that go in there and out of their places every single day. So we can say support 1B, and that's supporting you guys. You don't get to do that. We can buy yard signs. You guys don't get to do that. So we really want to pair up and be friends here. We don't want to be an adversarial group. We don't want to be a special interest group. We want to be a true grassroots business chamber. So I hope you guys can come Thursday, and I hope you join, and I hope you have our best interest at heart. Thanks.
Thank you, Pat. Any other speakers? I don't see any. This will bring us to agenda item 6, which is the consent agenda items. Consent agenda items may be adopted by a single motion. All ordinances must be read by title prior to a vote on the motion, and any consent agenda item may be removed at the request of a council member. There's only one item on this tonight. It's item A, ID 17-255, approval of the August 15th, 2017 regular meeting minutes.
Mr. Chairman, I move approval of consent agenda item 6A.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Ready to vote?
The vote is 7 in favor. The motion carries unanimously.
Brings us to agenda item 7, ordinances for first reading, and we have none this evening. Agenda item 8 is ordinances for second reading and public hearing, and we do have that this evening. We'll have one item that we're going to be talking about. This is ordinance 22-2017. It's an ordinance on second reading amending Title 11, Chapter 9, Section 4, B and C of the City Code for clarification of size percentages and adequate water and sewer facilities under administrative plat and replat, and the definition of subdivision in Title 11, Chapter 1, Section 6. This is an item we've talked about at study sessions several times, and we've had a first reading. We do have a staff member here to make a presentation if council would like. And I'll just make that optional since we've had a lot of discussion on that. I don't see an interest at this point, so I'm going to open the public hearing at 7:07. I do not have, yes, I do have Pam Chadburn signed up to speak. This will be speaking to this ordinance for second reading.
Yes, and Council, I think I'm Pam Chadburn still, and I live a block and a half from here still. So I think I've spoken about this before, and I think it's totally arbitrary. I don't see references to other cities, and I don't see this worked out in terms of impact in fact, this neighborhood around us, which because of the R5 and CA rezoning has been attacked by infill redevelopment that is displacing affordable housing and the characteristic homes that people talk about Littleton for. Charm, they say. And I know because I talk to people when I pass out flyers or at Western Welcome Week. I live here, and that's what they say. They like our houses now. The infill duplexes, that many of which have gone to Planning Commission and gotten exemptions, so they go out to the sides, the edges of the property line, and violate our setbacks, and remove light and air and vision and visibility for the rest of us, over and over. That's what's happening. What's the impact on that? Why doesn't this legislation even consider working out a couple examples for this area, much less several other characteristic neighborhoods in Littleton? This was kind of dreamed up, oh, what, sounds good, and let's improve the language, and that's great, but I don't find that of adequate analytical value to pass this. So I think I've said this before, it sounds like your minds are made up, but there's no there. This isn't well-founded, and we don't know what it will do. I would like you to have staff bring something back and tell us what it will do in various neighborhoods. Apply it to certain sites. Say what it would look like. That's what we need. Not just a schematic that says, well, in this case or this case, it would have these little squares. We can apply this to our real parcels in Littleton, and we should see that. And in my neighborhood in particular, affordable housing is being displaced. I've walked around. I know people who are gone. The people who have come in are people who are paying $675,000 for duplexes. That's not who we've lost. We're changing the character of the community, folks. We don't know what this causes. I'd like you to vote against it and have staff go back and do some more work. Thank you.
Thank you. I do not have anybody else signed up to speak. Is there anyone else who would like to speak to this matter? Close the public hearing then at 7:10. If I can get a motion in a second, we could have discussion if warranted.
I move to approve on second reading ordinance 22, 2017, amending Title 11, Chapter 9, Section 4, Paren B and Paren C of the City Code for clarification of size percentages and adequate water and sewer facilities under the administrative plat and replat and the definition of subdivision in Title 11, Chapter 1, Section 6.
Second.
So this will give council an opportunity to discuss this if there's any other discussion.
What's in front of us is to tighten up language for what used to be called the subdivision exemption, and now it's, I forget the name.
That's funny.
Plat and replat. And when we went through and changed the subdivision exemption to plat and replat, there was an effort to tighten up the language to make it more restricting of where it could be used. When we got done with that, after it passed, there's a realization there was a couple sections there that were not clear on where the language wasn't clear on what the intent was. And so the purpose of this modification is to clarify the language. The plat and replat already has been passed, so I view this as a step forward to clarify and remove ambiguity on what the restrictions are. And one of the specific sections is on lot sizes, on when this can be applied, or more specifically, when it cannot be applied. So I think this is a good amendment.
Just real quick, is what this does in my reading is tighten up the administrative process so that indeed those things that are outside of the administrative process can actually follow the flow. And by tightening the administrative process here, it looks at the character of the neighborhood in moving through this. So I think you're right, Councilman Clark.
Yeah, if there's an issue with R5, that probably needs to be taken separately.
Separate issue.
And there very well may be an issue with R5 and the minimum lot size, but this is a separate issue from that. Sorry.
Well, I want to give staff some kudos on this. This has been something we've been wrestling with for a very long time, and the challenge with dealing with something like this is that there are a variety of scenarios that it can be affected, and you want to make sure that you're not creating something with a bunch of unintended consequences. And I think that there's been an extraordinary amount of work and research and vetting being done by staff, and then consequently a number of study sessions with council where we've had an opportunity to kind of share thoughts. And so bringing what we have in front of us tonight, I think is, and what we've looked at in the past, I think is a huge step forward in correcting a lot of the deficiencies and problems that we have in our code. I know for a fact that this particular part of our code has delayed a number of development, small, medium, and large, where developers have been actually waiting for us to get some sort of resolution on this. And so commending that we finally have it in front of us in the final form, and appreciate all the work that went into it. So thank you very much.
Additional comments from council or questions? We also, any questions of staff? Not hearing any. Well, we do have a motion and a second. Are we ready to vote? Ready to vote?
The vote is 7 in favor. The motion carries unanimously.
This brings us to Agenda Item 9, General Business. We have 2 items, A and B, in this part of the agenda. Agenda item 9A is Resolution 39-2017. It's a resolution to approve the economic incentives policy, and we have a staff member, our Economic Development Director, Denise Stevens, to talk to council tonight about that.
Good evening, Council. Denise Stevens, Economic Development Director. We are asking Council to approve Resolution 39-2017, an economic incentives policy. Just wanted to point out that we kind of covered a lot of these details in our study session on August 8th. Taking away from that, your concerns, we added Council suggestions to the policy. Everything that you had mentioned is included, and we also amended the process, the proposed process, to reflect your concerns. So just as a little background, recently the City Council has approved various incentive agreements, and when these agreements were negotiated, there was no formal policy or process to guide staff as it considered proposals from businesses seeking economic incentives. And over the past few years, the economy has improved and lending rates have been low. Littleton is an attractive place for business and land development, but certain uncontrollable events may influence future interest. As remaining vacant land is developed, the challenges of redevelopment will become increasingly important. The economy may plateau or decline, and interest rates may rise, as we've seen recently. This means the cost of development and redevelopment may become more expensive. If that occurs, it will be more likely that business owners and land developers will approach the city with requests for incentives. Having an approved incentives policy and process will standardize how requests are considered and will require the applicant to follow a defined process and submit documentation for review and validation. Staff understands the need to monitor compliance and measure the outcomes of incentive agreements. Staff will make sure incentive agreements include terms that can be monitored for compliance and will provide information to Council that measures outcomes on a biannual basis. The options are Council can decide not to approve the economic incentive policy, which will result in a lack of clarity for staff and developers regarding the incentives that Council will consider. Approving this economic incentives policy does mean Council is obligated to approve any request for incentives. Approving the proposed economic incentives policy puts the responsibility for proposing incentives on the developer, and they must comply with city policy. On August 8th, 2017, in the study session, Council did request the review and approval process be modified, and your document should reflect those improvements. The fiscal impact, there isn't one. This is merely a policy to guide those requests. Staff recommends approval of the economic development policy.
Do we have questions for Denise Stevens? Not seeing any. Thank you. Do we have council comments before we, let's see, I'm going to ask for a motion in a second. Let me ask for a motion in a second, and then we can have discussion.
I move to approve the resolution supporting economic incentives policy.
Second.
With that, discussion. Do I hear any? Bill?
Yeah, I think, Denise, thank you for your presentation. It's important to have some sort of a guideline. This is not an obligation by the city in any way, shape, or form. It's simply a guide that enables us to to understand how incentives would be structured if we were to elect to offer them in any given case. We had several people comment earlier on the international issues. The cherry blossom thing came in, and I think what that brings to mind is that there are a lot of changes happening in the Denver area, in the metropolitan area, and Littleton is subject to that. Whether or not we live with that on every day, it happens over the longer term. I was in the general store today on Main Street, and a couple came in. They were from Arkansas, and they had read about Littleton, and in a trip to Colorado, intentionally came to our Main Street because they had read about it down in Arkansas. They wanted to see it. That's a long-term impact. I continued a conversation with Shane George, the manager of the store, and a minute later, a couple walked in from the UK. So we're getting people from 2 foreign countries, the UK and Arkansas, and all in one visit. But we have 16.4 million visitors to Denver every year. DIA is the 6th busiest airport in the world. We've had triple growth in residency in downtown Denver since 2000. We need to be aware of the impact of this on Littleton so that the changes we make are changes that benefit the citizens who live here and the community at large and our tax base and enable us to be competitive. If we're going to do these things and keep our culture at the same time we survive the pressure of economic growth, we need to do it in a deliberate and thoughtful way, and this enables us to do this on a selective basis. One example of economic incentives is the $50,000 grant fund we have on Main Street. You've heard these numbers before, but since the Historic District went in place in 2005 through the end of 2016, citywide taxes increased by 37.3%. In the downtown area alone, which is incentivized, taxes increased by 114.9%. That's the result of incentivization. And that's something we need to have available in order to make Littleton thrive in the future. So having this structure in place that is non-binding, we select these on a one-by-one basis to make sure that Littleton thrives down the line is very important to our future, and I heartily support it.
Jerry first.
Thank you. I'm going to support this. I do believe it's important that we've talked up here before about not being clear with the staff, and they're having questions on where are we on particular issues. This does not commit the city manager, does not commit the city council to grant the incentives. But I think by passing this resolution, we are definitely giving more, not necessarily direction, but we're making it more clear with what we would like to see with this kind of incentive type packages.
Jerry, Phil.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. With this and going through the general criteria, one of the things that's important and is outlined in this policy is there needs to be a significant private investment that comes to the city. And to some extent, this is not a giveaway, please come here. What it is it's a economic incentive in exchange for private money coming into the city, and it includes that money that might be spent in public sector improvements or in the public right-of-way as well. And I believe, as Councilman Valdez indicated, provides clarity for staff in looking at the criteria to say, hey, you come in, you become part of our community, you're committed to being part of our community, and you're actually contributing to ours. We'll work with you. Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem.
I also fully support this, and this is another example of something that we've needed for a long time, and I'm glad that we've got it, almost. And I think the other part of this that is really important, in my opinion, is that this helps us to be able to create partnerships with new businesses and with new development. This is us showing that we have more of an open hand to welcoming new business and the right type of development. It also obviously keeps us in control of the purse strings, which I think is important. But adding clarity to what incentive program we have, just simply being able to have an incentive program already opens doors and invites new commerce. And without that, it was a closed door. So I think having the door open is great. Having the clarity, again, similar to what the community development did with the subdivision, everybody understands now. We have it in black and white. It's clear. There's no speculation. And so decisions can be made quicker. People can walk into this with a greater level of knowledge of what they can expect. And that, in and of itself, I think is a huge growth opportunity for us. And it's a huge move forward in the right direction for the city. And again, creating these great partnerships. So I appreciate staff's work on this and definitely support it.
Any additional comments? Additional comments by council members or questions? I'm not hearing any. We do have a motion and a second. I also want to support this, and it's interesting. I've been to a couple different events over the last couple of weeks in which economic development was discussed. One of them was with mayors at CML, and there was a presentation and a showing of hands for how many people had this kind of a strategic plan and an incentives plan. And I raised my hand for the one, and I knew we were working on the other. But the point of the speakers was that you just have to have it to be competitive out there. You have to have it so that people who are doing their research on the internet prior to even knowing much more about the city can begin to check off the blocks of where they would like to invest their time and their effort and put their business. So it's very important. The second meeting I went to was the city of Denver's downtown development group and chamber put together a helicopter tour for 9 site visitors from around the country to look at sites within Denver area. 3 helicopters, 3 site visitors on each, and prior to that was a welcoming breakfast and a talk by people who had chosen to put their businesses in Denver. And it's interesting how incentives came up, not so much that they got them, but more that it showed a willingness on the part of the city to participate and want to bring businesses and describe the kinds of things that are important in that strategic plan. So this puts us where we need to be for all the things that are happening, so I very much support it. Are we ready to vote?
The vote is 6 in favor, with Councilmember Clark voting no. The motion carries 6-1.
This brings us to agenda item B, ID 17-256. This is a discussion and possible action to accept the mediation report regarding the intergovernmental agreement for fire and emergency services and to instruct the city attorney to prepare appropriate amendments to the intergovernmental agreement for fire dispatch services and to work with staff to prepare an intergovernmental agreement for fire dispatch services with the South Metro Fire District. And our presenter will be our city attorney, Stephen Kemp, who has been working on this issue. And just, this is one of those issues that is very tied up in certain legal matters. So I would like us to all listen real carefully to our city attorney as he talks about the areas that by the very nature of being a mediation need to be kept confidential.
Mayor, Council, it's a pleasure to be here tonight. This matter came before the Council previously based on a request for mediation from the 2 other parties to what commonly we call the Fire Partnership Agreement. What the Fire Partnership Agreement is, it's an intergovernmental agreement between the Highlands Ranch Metro District, and for those in the audience, a Metro District is a type of special district that can provide a variety of services. The second party is the Littleton Fire Protection District, which is a special district that primarily provides one service, fire protection, and the city of Littleton. And these 3 entities are served by the Littleton Fire Rescue, which is really the City of Littleton's fire department. Now, the intergovernmental agreement has been in place for a number of years, and recently the parties have developed a dispute on an issue, which is paragraph 5 of this agreement. And paragraph 5 of this agreement is basically pertaining to dispatch and how dispatch services are provided. Currently, under the agreement, the City of Littleton provides all dispatch services. We then charge the other two parties for their dispatch services. The other two parties had a number of concerns about dispatch in terms of both the staffing, the adequacy of the response, and so they had requested mediation. The city agreed, and so a mediation was held before John Hayes. And Mr. Hayes, again, more for the audience's background, has been a long-time city attorney. He is what I would call one of the icons in the Colorado city attorney profession. He has been a city attorney, represented this city and many other cities for many, many years. He is, in the time I've been here, he is an exceptional lawyer and understands these types of issues extraordinarily well. And so he served as the mediator. Now, what a mediator does is sometimes people get it confused with arbitration. Arbitration is where you have someone who just makes the decision, pounds the table, and that's it. A mediator, rather, basically works with the parties. He or she will issue a report at the end of the day, but you don't have to agree with it. You don't even have to accept it. It's basically an impartial person's take on the issue. And the idea is it helps the parties to go back and look at this and say, okay, what's an impartial person's take on the issue? Now, in the council communication that I did, and for the city, myself and Mr. Young, the deputy city manager, were the two representatives on the mediation. And so we participated. We also had Chris Armstrong, the fire chief, there as a resource, because obviously there's some fire issues that the technical side of it can become important. So he served as a resource in this mediation. And the issue underlying the mediation is the two other participants in the fire partnership agreement, Highlands Ranch Metro District and the Littleton Fire Protection District, believe that the city should enter into an intergovernmental agreement with the South Metro Fire District for dispatch services. Now, let's make really clear what we're talking about and what we're not. In the past, I know that there were some things bantered about, for example, consolidation of the departments. That's not part of this agreement. It was never part of the mediation. It has nothing to do with our discussion tonight because it's not part of this intergovernmental agreement that was in dispute. One of the other issues that had come up and sort of underlined this mediation was the withdrawal previously of Cunningham Fire Protection District, which is a totally different district, from its agreement with the City of Littleton. Now, you might wonder, well, why are these other two districts wanting the city to do a different means of providing dispatch? And the issue is they have two fundamental concerns that came up in the mediation. First is cost, and second is dispatch services. So let's talk about each of those concerns that underlie the mediation, and then I'd like to address the mediator's recommendation and results, and then answer any questions the council might have. On the screen in front of you, and this is a dispatch chart. This chart was created by our finance and fire departments, and they created it for me because I said, I don't want you just to do the numbers. I want you to give me the numbers. I want to go back. I want to look at the numbers. And if there's numbers I don't understand, I want you to justify those to me before we talk about them with the council so that the numbers can be explained and we can present numbers to you that explain why we have this issue. So if you look at this chart, you see 5 years history of annual call volume. And those volumes from 2012 to 2016 are the actual number of calls by each entity. City of Littleton, Littleton Fire Protection District, and Highlands Ranch Metro District. The reason for showing you those 5 years of calls is to take and give you a 5-year average of each entity's calls and what the percentage of each entity's calls are to the total. And the reason we used 5 years versus 1 is that 1 year could be an outlier. You could have 1 year where Littleton's calls were extremely high, or you could have 1 year where Highlands Ranch Metro District was extremely high. But by going back and looking at a 5-year history, that gives us a more accurate look at the percentages of call volume by each entity. Now, we then took 2017 and we projected call volumes for 2017. And then we projected call volumes for 2018 based on a 7% increase, which was what the 2015 Fire Master Plan projected would be. Now, the thing, if you look at this chart on the right-hand side, you will see the cost per call in 2018 based on the budget adopted by South Metro and based on the City of Littleton projected budget. The South Metro call cost is going to be $58.46 a call. That's what it's going to cost for them to provide dispatch services. If you move down to the chart, you'll see 2018 cost per call. Based on looking at a 3-year rolling average of budgets and calls, the City of Littleton cost per call is going to be $83.86. So roughly we're talking $25.40 more for the City of Littleton to answer that call than South Metro. And that is what leads to this issue. The two other entities are saying, wait a second, our position is we want to be the most efficient in the use of our taxpayer money. And that means that we should look at a different method of providing dispatch. Now, the fire chief over the last year actually has looked at a couple, really 3 different methods. He looked at what other intergovernmental options there were. The other 2 primary intergovernmental options, Denver and West Metro, don't use our dispatch software. They don't have the same kind of either automatic aid or mutual aid agreements that we have with South Metro. And so as a result, from a cost standpoint, it's not cost effective to consider those. So then the question becomes, the real only alternative option to the city doing it would be to look at South Metro. Now, as I mentioned in the council communication, dispatch has a number of issues. The first issue is that this is a critical issue within the fire service because unlike other aspects, you have to have people there to answer those calls. And you have to have essentially adequate staffing, not minimal staffing. You're really staffing more to a maximum staffing because you can't let the call go on hold. When you have that emergency, that person who maybe was found in a swimming pool, or that person who's having a heart attack, or that person who has a fire call, it doesn't work to have them on hold. Their phone has to be answered. One of the difficulties, as you've heard previously, is the city has had a difficulty in recruiting dispatchers, and we have a difficulty with the number of dispatchers, simply because we have 2 dispatchers per shift, which basically means people are at their consoles the entire time. We have issues when we have situations where people are absent for illness or other reasons. And so it's very difficult in the city to staff adequately to provide the level of services. And one of the points that the fire partners raised is you should have adequate staffing. And adequate staffing doesn't necessarily mean 2 dispatchers per shift, because you should have sufficient dispatchers that they are able to take breaks, that they are able to take lunch, and that there is always coverage that when that console rings, it's going to get answered. Now, the city's position has been that we have been doing everything we can to upgrade our dispatch services. And as you can see, I mean, the budget has been adjusted. Now, the difficulty is we don't have the ability to have the economies of scale. And by that, I mean, if you were in a large entity, whether it be South Metro or where I'm from, previously the city of Phoenix, you have literally 50, 60, 100 people working dispatch. You have huge numbers that you're able to much easily adjust staffing. And that is where you have the benefit of that economy of scale. We simply, in Littleton, will not have that economy of scale. We don't have the large entity to do that. And this mediator looked at all of these items. Mr. Hayes looked at these items, and we went back and forth. And one of the issues that this poses is that the current agreement has a number of other concerns for us. One of them being all of the revenues that flow into the city go against our expenditure limit. And because they go against our expenditure limit, this sometimes can create issues under the Taxpayer Bill of Rights. Now, the city has a number of other table issues, which is why the council addressed that issue the way it did. But this can also have some impacts in the future. So one of the things that in this mediation the city came back with as this was being discussed is that if we were to do some kind of other alternative for dispatch, having South Metro bill the city and having us have no way to determine whose calls are what and who's paying for what doesn't work. So the Mr. Young and I, we proposed back, we said, listen, if we're going to look at having a third-party service provider provide these dispatch communication services, they need to bill each party. They need to bill City of Littleton, need to bill Littleton Fire Protection District, and they need to bill Highlands Ranch Metro District. And not only that, each party is going to pay South Metro directly. So the city isn't collecting those revenues that then increase our revenue and create issues for us ultimately under Tabor. And we also said, listen, we need to have this billed based on a 12-month period for looking back the 12 months for the number of dispatch calls and cost. Now, what ultimately happened is each of the parties' representatives said, listen, we think this is a deal that we should bring back to our respective bodies. And so the Highland Ranch Metro District is going to bring this mediation report back to their body. Littleton Fire Protection has indicated they will bring it back to their body, and I am coming to you. Now, understand in the mediation, there is no agreement because we each have to get the approval of our respective governing bodies. And one of the reasons this is a little bit new for me, because in other places I have worked, we would probably have this discussion and I would seek your instruction in an executive session. That's not consistent with the City of Littleton Charter. So I'm coming to you in this session seeking your instruction. Now, based on your instruction, then we will prepare an agreement. You are going to have to approve the agreement after it's prepared. You're not bound until that agreement is in place. But as your lawyer, I don't believe I have the authority to work with both the staff and with our outside counsel, Kissinger and Fellman, to prepare this agreement without getting your authorization and instruction first, which is why we are here tonight. And so the mediator's recommendation, as you can see in the letter from the mediator, the public may wonder, why wasn't that part of the packet? under Colorado law, the mediation letter from the mediator is confidential. Cannot be disclosed by law. It is a confidential document, even more confidential than attorney-client privileged. That's why you were probably wondering, boy, the city attorney's being a stickler here. He's actually delivering it to us. He won't send an email, and he's wanting it back. And then that's because it's confidential by state statute, and it cannot be disclosed. It cannot be used in any court proceeding. But as you can see in Mr. Hayes' recommendation, which I've in the council communication addressed, as he stated that the position that the city negotiated in the mediation was the best that the city may hope to obtain, even if you looked at alternatives. And let's talk about the alternatives for a minute. Let's just say, okay, the council says, no, we're not going to instruct you, Mr. City Attorney. We're just going to let the chips fall where they may. I can tell you both of these entities have made it absolutely crystal clear they intend to invoke their right to withdraw from this agreement on November 1 of this year. I have no reason to believe that what they've told me is not correct, and they have both stated that. Now, that means in a year, we're going to basically have what I would call an intergovernmental divorce. We're going to have to divide up all the property. Now, I have been involved with a number of agreements where you've had to divide up the property. And I wish I could say that governments all sit down and we all agree and we all say, okay, this goes to this government, this goes to this government. Regrettably, I've not had it work that way. We have almost always ended up in either litigation or mediation, and we have spent a considerable amount of money to accomplish the division of property. And I will tell you, in my judgment, this agreement that we have, the property division and the termination provisions do have some lack of clarity. And this is an agreement that dates back many, many years. It dates back before 2000, so we're talking about a very old agreement. The parties who negotiated it are no longer around or may not even have any memory of it. And so I can see very likely that we are going to end up in some kind of proceeding to discuss how we end the agreement. Now, the instruction I received from you in the study session is that all of council said, listen, we value this fire partnership. And this agreement doesn't change the nature of the fire partnership. Littleton Fire Rescue is here right now. If we entered into an intergovernmental agreement for dispatch services, and we're really talking about two agreements, one a modification to the existing fire partnership agreement and a new agreement with South Metro Fire District. There's still going to be Littleton Fire Rescue. It's those trucks from Littleton Fire Rescue are going to come just like they do right now. That is not going to change. What is going to change is we're going to have a level of dispatch services that we currently do not have. And finally, as the lawyer, I am concerned about the liability that we are currently exposed. I am very, very concerned. Years ago in the fire business, the courts held that fire was one of those services you couldn't be sued for, that the nature of providing fire service is so critical that the law should not allow for individuals to sue fire departments. I can tell you that's not the case anymore. That in a number of states, the traditional fire, what they used to call the fireman's rule, has gone by the wayside. And courts are now allowing fire departments to be sued for inadequate dispatch. They're now, and those suits can become expensive. And I tell you that not to somehow make anyone panicked or whatever, but from a lawyer standpoint, I need to tell you that, listen, a relevant fact that you may want to consider is the simple nature of the liability that the city has in operating the service. From my standpoint, I did risk management for the city I was previously in for 23 years. One of the biggest principles I always had was, if I can shift risk to someone else, that is usually a good thing. Now, once in a while, there are just things that cities have to do, and we can't shift that risk. It's just the nature of what it is. But if we can shift risk and have someone else carry that risk, that can be a good thing, because the city is not carrying that risk. And when we look at all of these things, both Mr. Young, and I can tell you why he's not here tonight, Mr. Young, Mr. Ralph, myself, we all concur that we want to recommend to you to accept the mediation report, and 2, to direct the city attorney to work with staff and the other parties to draft an amendment to the Fire Protection Intergovernmental Agreement to modify paragraph 5 so that there's separate billing, separate accountability, and we are not dealing with those revenues. And finally, to work with the staff to negotiate an acceptable intergovernmental agreement for fire dispatch for fire and emergency services with the South Metro Fire District. This is not done until you approve those 2 intergovernmental agreements. So there's some thinking, oh, well, we'll instruct the city attorney. No, these have to come back because you're the policymakers and you have to approve those. But now I am asking for your instruction to me to say, yes, proceed in that direction. And with that, I would be pleased, or I'm sure if you have any questions for the city manager, he would be pleased to answer those.
So this is the opportunity for council to have any questions or discussion with the city attorney or the city manager.
I have a couple questions.
Please.
Do you know what our goal is for dispatching? How many seconds it is that the call stays in the dispatch center before it's toned out to the fire stations?
In terms of the goal?
Yes.
Well,
How many seconds?
I think the goal for the city should be that we should have a dispatch, however we do it, that is adequately staffed to provide dispatch services to all of the people depending.
Thank you, but you're not answering the question.
Okay.
How many, do you know what the goal is? What the fire departments and the contractual goal is for how long calls stay in the dispatch center before they're, I'm asking you.
Okay. No, I do not know what their goal is for answering those calls.
I believe it's 60 seconds. Do you know what percentage of calls, that 90% of them are answered and dispatched within 60 seconds? Do you know what the percentage is of calls that meet that goal?
I don't know that. I'm certain the fire chief could discuss that. I don't know that.
It's over 90%. So the next question is, how often have we missed the goal? Because what you're telling us is we have a safety issue with dispatch.
I am telling you that, yes, both of your fire partners believe that there is a significant safety issue with dispatch.
Yes, they do.
They verbalized that and they've said that.
But the reports that the fire department put out show something differently. So I'm kind of curious on how the mediation went, what the position was that we asserted in the mediation.
As I mentioned to the council in the mediation memo I provided to you, we asserted that we believed that we had met the agreement by adding additional dispatchers. And we believe that we had met that agreement by adding those additional dispatchers. Now, I would tell you in discussing this with your fire chief and in the mediation, discussing it with the other 2 fire entities, they don't believe. And by discussing it with your fire chief, he still expresses concerns about our ability to provide the level of dispatch services that we certainly can't provide the level that South Metro does in terms, and our fire partners do not believe our dispatch services are adequate. They have both said, and I can tell you they both repeated that position, not only in the public letter that they sent to the city, which is public record, they repeated that position in the mediation that they do not believe the city's dispatch services are adequate. And they also believe that there's a cost issue in addition, as you can see on this chart.
Well, I agree with you that that's the position that they're stating, but we're actually meeting the goals that are called out in the contract that they agreed to. So it's one of those things where we've got the data, we're publishing the data on a month-to-month basis, the data goes to them, they read the same data that we read, comes from Debbie, that shows that we're actually meeting our performance goals for dispatch.
And we did adopt in 2014 a set of standards for that. And so we do have those standards. Now, those standards are left in the judgment of the city, and what the other two partners, they essentially, their remedy, if they don't feel that the standards are either adequate or that they don't feel the city is meeting the standards, why we have sort of a get-together, the ultimate remedy is to actually withdraw from the agreement. So yes, we do have standards. My understanding is that those standards, which we have, and the parties agreed to in 2014, those are essentially the standards that we aim to follow.
And their remedy, their option at any point is to withdraw. I mean, they don't have to have a dispute with dispatch to decide that they want to withdraw, and this certainly isn't the first time that they threatened to do that.
I certainly understand that there's history here. I think the difference here is that both of these entities have made it abundantly clear to a third party that they intend to exercise this. Now, maybe they are all, so to speak, just playing games. I would tell you, certainly in this mediation, and obviously in mediation, Mr. Hayes met with each party separately, so I don't know what was said to Mr. Hayes by either Highlands Ranch or Littleton Fire Protection. I do know what they said clearly in the portion of this that was that the parties have interacted together, which is that they intend, if there's not that they intend to withdraw, that they're not willing to continue with the current dispatch arrangement. And now, maybe they would change their mind. I'm obviously, one will not know until November 1. But that's what they have said.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Well, first of all, I give major credit to the dispatch staff that they are getting 90% of the calls out in the 60 seconds, because the conditions under which they are working and the pressure under which they're working in the confined area, the stress level of that job and the fact that they get to sit in one chair for 12 hours, sometimes with barely something to eat, gives them, in my opinion, all gold medals for being able to continue to serve this community at the high peak level that they are. For us to continue to expect them to do that is a complete and total disservice to our employees and to our citizens. And I, for one, am not going to allow that to continue with my vote. This is a bigger issue than a 60-second, 90-minute, 90% issue also. This is a $400,000 savings. I agree with the partners. We have a responsibility to the fiduciary respect to our citizens to be able to save them money and not cost them money. When we can improve service and cost less, that, for me, that's a no-brainer. That's a done deal. This is a win-win. To indicate at any level that these partners are playing any games with their threats, I can assure you, as the fire liaison who sat in these meetings every month with these partners, this is not a game to them. This is not a threat. They are serious. The service to their communities is tantamount. The service to their taxpayers and the fiduciary responsibility they see as their responsibility is tantamount to their decisions. And I respect their decisions. I respect their urgency to make this happen. I think that they took extreme steps. It hurts me. is troublesome that they felt they had to go this far because we did not make a different decision with, in my opinion, the same information we have tonight. So I support this 100%, and I, as far as I'm concerned, want to see the absolutely city attorney march forward, make this happen. Thank you.
Additional comments? Phil?
I don't know if you're ready for a motion, Mr. Chair.
Let me just make sure everybody's had a chance. Okay. If they have a comment or concern.
My comments are in 3 areas. One is forward-looking with regard to safety for our businesses, our citizens, as well as the firefighters themselves. And one of the things that comes not only with a certified performance center, is also a capability that we don't have in our current dispatch, which is to have a remote on-site location for a major incident. That's a capability we don't currently have. Second is with regard costs to sustainability. I know there's no guarantee of any cost sustainability for the future, but there has been a period of guaranteed costs that have been taken again until we get to the agreement, for sure. Don't have that. And third, that as you have mentioned, City Attorney, Littleton Fire and Rescue has the opportunity to set the protocols, set those standards, to have them reported and to measure performance against those standards so that we can essentially have the same kind of control. And based on the communication technology that they do have, there's no additional cost because it would integrate with our existing communications that we have with our firefighters. And I find those all compelling and think that they're great.
Yeah, thank you very much for your presentation. This is one that it was a tough decision when it first came to us in the first time. I realize that we've been struggling to maintain the excellent service that dispatch has been doing. That the chief has come to us more than once to express some of the issues and challenges he was having on maintaining that level of service. The liability issue is huge for me, and I appreciate your really bringing that to light over the last few weeks that you've done that. I think the liability issue that is created by what we're running in dispatch is at times less than adequate to serve the need. That doesn't mean that they're not making the level of service that has to happen, but there are some holes in there that if certain things happen, it could be bad. And the heck with the city being sued for those that need those services sooner rather than later. That concerns me very much. The first time that the chief brought this to us, and it was a very difficult decision, I think, for the chief to have to come tell us something like this. He went into the department and he's done a great job. And I really appreciate it, Chief, everything you've done up there, as well as your fine staff that you have going. The first time it came to us, I didn't really feel like I had enough information to make a decision one way or another. I think since then, I think the chief has done a good job with the information that he's brought before us, and also the city attorney. I think you have also given me some clarity on the liability issue is the biggest thing for me right now. And I really do think that in my opinion, that it is in the best interest of the citizens of Littleton that we contract at this point with South Metro. And I think with that in mind, I'm hoping that Mayor Pro Tem Brinkman, who has, I know, bled over this thing, could make a motion to some degree.
Any other comments or questions? Bill.
We bear in mind throughout this entire process that the number one job of fire protection is to protect our citizens. It's a safety issue, and that should be our guiding force in all of this. I think Councilman Clark's issues on we've had good call proficiency is well taken. That's a backward look, and we're used to that. But I think that when we approach an issue like this, we should always be looking forward. And when you go visit South Metro's facility, you see that they have a significantly greater capability to handle increased call volume than we do. We have 2 stations, we have 2 chairs. And if you've visited the fire dispatch center, which I think most council members have, you see that they can get taxed even with a small amount of call volume. So 90% of the time in a fire dispatch center, things are pretty quiet. It's that 10% of the time when all hell breaks loose that you can get into issues. Their capability with multiple dispatchers on at one time, bunk rooms so that they can have shorter shifts, they have training on site, give them not only an ability to spread risk at their level, but also an opportunity to reduce risk. And that's a big deal. And I think I agree with Councilman Valdez that the explanation of risk and liability is a significant one that we all need to be concerned with. We can't ignore the cost savings that, going from $83.86 a call to $58.46. That's a big savings. That's $25 over $25 a call. It's a 30% reduction in the cost of our dispatch center. In a city that's struggling financially and has issues down the road, we can't ignore that. And we also have to look at the Tabor cap help that this frees up, which is another excellent point that had not been brought up before, that really gives the city the ability to pave roads so that maybe somebody doesn't run into a pothole and hit their chin on the steering wheel and need that fire call in the first place. So it's all a mounting up of factors that say it's time for us to reduce our risk, reduce our costs, and increase the safety for our citizens. And not to do this is to look backwards instead of forward and plan for our citizens' future. So I heartily support this and encourage everybody else to do the same.
Any other comments? Peggy?
Yeah, I'm really torn about this, but cost issue, let's look at that for a second. If we follow the cost logic, then it seems to me we ought to just ask Littleton to be annexed by some other city and really spread the cost out in all kinds of ways. So cost to me is not the only factor. We have our city attorney, we have our city manager, our city clerk. We do have our fire folks. We do have different services. They're ours. And the people historically have liked having our stuff. So cost per se, while it's important to a certain extent, if we follow it, as I said, to the total logic, we would just merge with somebody and all get on with our lives doing something else. It just is troubling to me. If we have things that need to be fixed, as in we don't have enough dispatchers, it's my understanding, and I think I said this at a prior meeting, that we were understaffed because the chief, for whatever reason, thought we were going to be merging, so he didn't fill positions. So when you don't do that, the whole organization sort of slips a bit, in addition to just not being able to respond at the rate that they might have. So my feeling is, at the very least, we should put this issue on hold for 6 months to just give it a chance to stabilize and look at it. The opportunity to merge isn't going to go away, but we would have a better chance to evaluate if we are indeed fully staffed in the dispatch center and see what happens. And we already have a darn good rate. So anyway, I'm not ready to vote to separate right now.
Okay, everybody's had one shot and ready
Round
for
two.
a motion? Ready for a motion?
Want to do the motion?
Yep. I move to approve and accept the mediation report regarding the IGA for fire and emergency dispatch services and direct the city attorney to prepare the appropriate amendment to the existing IGA and the appropriate IGA with South Metro for dispatch services for council approval.
Second. We have a motion and a second, and protocol would be there could be additional discussion if necessary. Doug?
I agree that we have a cost issue, but I think that if we actually tried, we could fix that, just as if we actually tried, we could fix the lack of dispatchers, which we found out. Dispatchers run 3 8-hour shifts. They don't work 12-hour shifts. They may, if they're taking overtime, work a longer shift. The night shift has the least amount of calls, and the average number of calls that come in 1 hour on the night shift is about 2 calls. And yet we have 3 dispatchers scheduled for the night shift. So if we're wondering why it is that we can't staff and why we're having cost issues, it may be because we're not applying our resources to the areas that we need to. The contract with South Metro is a 3-year contract. Sorry, a 4-year contract. It started out as a 3-year contract. We expressed concerns, and they extended it by simply 1 year. Once we get rid of our dispatch center, it's going to be extremely difficult or impossible to bring it back. And we are still in the discussions on mergers with South Metro or who knows what. Getting rid of the dispatch center at this point in time removes a great many alternatives that we have as we're investigating what to do with the fire department, and that process is still in play. So we're rushing forward to transfer over to South Metro a dispatch center where we put a hiring freeze on hiring dispatchers and then said we couldn't get them, and we're assigning people to night shifts when we're complaining about not having enough dispatchers to run days. I think that's a significant issue, but most importantly, there's not really a rush on this, other than the fact that the partners have a rush on this. And this is once again where when we get into a dispute with the partners, then they throw up the possibility, or in this case, I guess, the more likelihood of splitting. And we've done no analysis at all on what that is. We're sitting here and we don't even actually have the mediation report. We have the letter from the mediator, and we're going forward without the information, without knowing what the alternatives are, making a decision to get rid of dispatch and contract it to South Metro before we've decided what we're going to do with the whole department. And there really is no urgency other than the urgency that the Highlands Ranch and Littleton Fire Protection District have. And that's over cost issues that we could probably solve on its own, and we've already hired the dispatchers. So from my viewpoint, this is ill-conceived, it's premature, and we're boxing ourselves and the city of Littleton and Littleton citizens in to some very limited options and alternatives in the future.
Are we ready to vote?
Explain what we got going here. Yes, it's further.
Okay, so this is a resolution to approve, or this is a vote to approve Resolution 39-2017, which was read in the motion, and it's to accept the mediation report and allow the city attorney to prepare appropriate amendments to the IGA. This is not adopting the IGA. We don't know what the IGA looks like until it's prepared, and I believe it'll be supported by additional evidence as needed.
This is your instruction to me to enter those negotiations and bring those documents back to you, and only when you approve those documents is the city bound, if at all.
Everybody have clarity on that? Okay.
The vote is 5 in favor with Councilmember Cole and Councilmember Clark voting no. The motion carries 5-2.
This brings us to agenda item 10. This is our opportunity for comments and reports. The city manager is first.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a brief reminder here for our audience and at home watching, or perhaps here this evening. We have our first town hall meeting tomorrow evening at 6:30. It actually is at the Falls Event Center located at 8199 South Park Court. You can also, obviously, the intent is this is electronic, so you can actually engage us through your phone. If you have any additional questions about that, you can actually look it up on the webpage, www.littletontownhall.org. So I look forward to tomorrow night. I know that all the council will be there, department directors, and this should be actually a lot of fun, in my opinion.
That's it? That's it? Okay, let's do council reports. We'll go start at this end. Councilmember Hopping.
Thank you. Tonight we had two issues of financial efficiency that came before council, and I'd like to congratulate council as a whole on their decisions. These are the kinds of decisions that, in part way, they should be more administrative than policy. These are really not difficult decisions in terms of what they bring. But what it does, and you can argue that point, but what it does is it frees us up to make quality of life decisions. Littleton is well known for quality of life. We hear that all the time. And it's the magazine, Colorado Homes and Lifestyles, right? But Littleton charm is here. We have increased tendency around the country. People are moving places because they have islands of life quality. We've got our downtown, we've got the river, we've got a lot of pieces of this town that are really reasons that people are attracted here. What's going to happen in the long term? We have to free up funds and creative thought about how those look in the future. We aren't going to have any more streets. Mobility is a huge problem for us and will continue to become more so as we get increasing congestion and our senior citizens can't get around as easily. We're going to have to convert our streets in some ways to give different ways of mobility. We have increasing opportunities for Lyft, Uber, rental vehicles of different types. Even Bill at Pedal, who sponsors the Criterium, has a senior bicycle service that can get people around town in a very efficient and healthy lifestyle. But we're going to have to tackle these issues that really go to lifestyle. So we need to plan for those linkages, and we need to think long-term about how to enhance our quality of life in the long term. And I really congratulate council for looking forward tonight to free up funds and to think creatively about how we do better for our future.
Councilmember Cernanek.
Ditto on Councilmember Hopping's comments, but I do have a near-term interruption to charm that is going to occur next Tuesday evening from 8 p.m. to 5:30 the next morning. So next Tuesday night, there's going to be a road closure at Broadway and C470 for a bridge platform to be installed. And so if you're looking to head down to our partners of Highlands Ranch, somewhere between 8 p.m. and 5:30 a.m. next Wednesday, 8 p.m. Tuesday and 5:30 a.m. next Wednesday, you don't want to take Broadway to get there. So that's there. The second is it's kind of this one item that proves the fallibility of legislators or policymakers in their approach. Is the special session call that's going to be held on October 2nd, or at least initiate on October 2nd, to deal with Senate Bill 17267 that was too quickly drafted and has some items that the governor wishes will be corrected. Whether that actually happens in the session or not will be one of those things that we can stay tuned to. So, and with that, and I certainly appreciate the folks coming down during public comment today. I know that the folks out at Peninsula really appreciate the work that the staff has done, and it's nice to have those folks actually take time out to do that, and also the folks with a lot of passion speaking about the Littleton Business Chamber. So I do appreciate those.
Councilmember Valdez.
Thank you, Mayor. as you all know, the Romano's restaurant, Italian restaurant, they celebrated their 50th year of operation. They've been 50 years at that same location. And I know, Bill, you've been around a while, and I've been around, and certainly the mayor and Peggy have been around for quite a while when they were just that little room, if you remember. And they've been at that same place, and we've had the opportunity to watch them grow, and I think that's fantastic. I'm hoping that maybe the city can some way find a way to recognize them at some point for that fine, their commitment to the city of Littleton in so many ways. Also on the, if I could, I want to, if you could to me sometime, city manager, send me some information on codes regarding apartment safety and things like that. I've had a call recently and some folks were asking about, what is the responsibility with the city as well as others. And just so that council also knows, I also asked the city manager as well as the chief of police for some information, or their thoughts at least, on traffic vans, the mobile traffic vans. As you know, we no longer have the intersection cameras. And I know at Littleton Boulevard as well as some other places, it's becoming, it's not good. The cars that go through there, sometimes it can be as many as 10 cars going through on a red light, making a turn or something like that. So I've asked them, that the chief at least, if he could provide us some information on, do mobile vans work? It's that simple. So unless any of you have a concern with not doing that, I'd like them to move forward just to provide that information to all of us, of course. And last but not least, but I think it's very important that the Littleton High School boys soccer team is in the top 10 as far as the teams go for the 4A. And congratulations to them. I think that's a huge achievement that the Lions have done.
Go Lions.
Councilmember Cole.
First on the Romanos, is it possible to bring them here and have special recognition?
I have information to write a proclamation for them, so we could possibly do the same thing that we did with Ms. Woodall this morning, or Mrs. Woodall.
Will you write it in Italian?
No.
I'm sure we could.
There.
I think we should go there.
Yeah, I'd asked them a while back if they could take a look at that, and I think the city manager's moving forward on that.
That would be great.
A 50-year restaurant is worthy.
Then I'd like to, and also thanks in advance for the birthday cake. I'm not quite sure why I get one, and Doug didn't get one, and the rest of you who have been having
We're not
birthdays
200 years
all
old.
We're not 200 years old, yeah.
Yet. You're also not Doug.
Jeez. Then I'd like to correct a portion of an oral report that was provided at a study session a few weeks ago anyway, that said, this was based on the community conversation that was, I forget what we called it, that was held at the museums earlier this year. Remember that one? Anyway, it said that the participants, Mark said the participants did not say they didn't shop on Main Street. The question that was put to them was, if you needed something, and it was along the lines of maybe paint or some fix-it thing or something of that sort, would you go to Main Street? And the answer to that was no, but the people said they did shop on Main Street. So I just want to clarify that people are going to Main Street for things, but it's not the fix-it things that some of the stores, the former stores, the previous stores used to offer, because they're not there anymore. But Main Street is getting a lot of action, at least from the people who were at that conversation. So, and then tomorrow, hopefully we have another good conversation. So,
Councilmember Clark.
We had Larry come down and ask us to take some action for the council to show that it's in favor of crab apples along Littleton Community Trail. when he took me down there, he was looking specifically on the embankment that overlooks the light rail station. I think that there's two issues that are probably involved in that. One is investigating whether we need permission from the railroad to do that, and then if we do, trying to get that permission. And the second one is the trees, my understanding, need to be watered for a couple years until they're established. And so the issue is how they get watered, either through extending an existing irrigation line that already exists, or have South Suburban come and water them with its water truck like it does up and down the canal and Lee Gulch right now. But I'm in favor of going forward on this. We have a citizens group that's willing to get the trees, plant the trees, and I think crab apples, I like crab apples. I've got one in my front yard. I think they're beautiful when they bloom. I think this is a worthy project, and I move that we direct the staff to move forward on this.
I would suggest, before there's a second to that, that this would come back when we bring the budget back. That was part of the budget. His ask was a consideration of the charitable donations in the budget. So I don't think it needs to be a separate motion. I think that, I don't remember how it wound up at the budget meeting, Bruce, do you, that it brought, maybe we waited for this, but it would come forth then. So I think, Doug, if it comes back there, are you going to be all right with that? I don't think we need to make a separate motion to bring that back.
Well, the money that was done on the nonprofits was actually separate from what this issue is.
No, his request was in the nonprofits, $1,500. He said he didn't do it in the open space, and he was going to do that next time. It was on that page.
I know it's on that page, but there are actually two different items.
Part of our budget, nonetheless.
Yeah. And I, quite honestly, I'm not ready to make a motion to do any of that until we hear back from our Public Works Director in terms of right-of-ways, because I know he had a big concern about that.
If I could direct it to the city manager, because I believe you have information and you've been moving forward with getting more information, and so you don't need further direction from council at this point, if I understand.
You know, staff has been involved with this organization for quite some time. You know, I guess my suggestion would be is that let staff kind of prepare an assessment here of what we see as the challenges, issues in developing the master plan, I think, as Mr. Borger was suggesting. I even had some discussion with him personally about that. I can't remember you have to go back and look at the notes here about your budget discussion. Yes, you did allocate funds. I can't remember whether or not we kept them in that nonprofit or we decided to move them to some other part of the budget. But I certainly could bring back a report that kind of, in essence, lets you know the level of effort that's going to be necessary here to kind of implement that kind of master plan concept.
Yeah, I'd be fine with that.
Mayor Pro Tem Brinkman.
No report.
So we died for lack of second.
Okay.
Well, I thought you were shocked by her no report.
I'll make it up next time.
I just, somewhere out there's somebody watching this who has a better memory than maybe we do. But I also went with Mr. Borger up along the top of the railroad depression. My memory is when that thing was built, there was an obligation to beautify it, and that the beautification requirements were very clear. And I think it was actually a percentage or it was something. And when I went up there with Mr. Borger, we found old sprinkler systems and et cetera that somebody followed up with putting those things in there, whether it was the railroad or the city or whatever. That's where somebody out there in the community may have a memory. But there may have been an obligation to have that thing beautified anyway, and it's fallen by the wayside. Not that anybody has any money waiting to do it. But. Okay, there is cake in the community room, and we are adjourned.